Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Anthony Cosenza and John Sheeran with the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We are so happy to have you with us once again this week, and we are happy because we're talking about a 1-0 start and not an 0-1 start, as that game kind of got off to a little bit of a rough start. And yeah, but hey, they're 1-0, and they've got a big game this week on Thursday night on a short week. And I know we're hustling and bustling. John, how are you, sir? I know you've been putting in a lot of work on the CincyJungle.com website, and as we all have. And but we're all trying to also celebrate a pretty big win, right?
Oh, for sure. The scheduling office kind of screwed us two years in a row with these week 2 Thursday night games. So a lot of stuff going in and out in the beginning of the year, but it's exciting. It's more football in the span of 4 days. So it's always good.
Yep. And this one's going to be special. We'll talk about that in just a little bit, about the Bengals taking on the Ravens, and helping us to preview the game, we hope, is Bill Laricos from Baltimore Beatdown, SB Nation's Baltimore Ravens site. He should be joining us here pretty shortly, so we'll help preview that game. Obviously, the Baltimore Ravens looked incredibly impressive in their first game of the season, absolutely dominating the Buffalo Bills. And I believe now we'd have our guest. Bill, are you there?
I'm here. How are we doing?
Good. How are you, sir?
Doing well.
Good.
Looking forward to the game.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually just kicked off the show, so perfect timing on your part there. Glad you were able to make some time for us tonight. We were just literally the last sentence that came out of my mouth was how dominating the Buffalo Bills, the win over the Buffalo Bills was for the Baltimore Ravens in Week 1. I guess what I want to ask you is, because Bengals fans in preseason Week 3, we got a decent look in that dress rehearsal at the Bills. We saw that is probably going to be a team that's going to struggle throughout the year. But how much of this was an absolutely dominating performance from the Baltimore Ravens? How much of it was the Bills just aren't that great? And how much of it is Week 1's just a wild card in general? Teams just kind of sometimes don't find their groove until a little bit into the year.
I expected a double-digit win. I wouldn't expect 47-3. But the Bills are not a great team, as we know, and I did expect the Ravens to show well. All the signs in the preseason and in practice were pointing to an improved team.
And Joe Flacco's taken a lot of heat over the past year or so. Some of it warranted, some of it not. He did have kind of a little bit of a down statistical year last year, but he looked pretty dang good in the opener here against the Bills. He hit, I think, 9 or 10 different receivers, and 3 of them were tight ends. Obviously, he's got the new wide receiver weapons. How big of a difference are those positions this year, and how big of an upgrade are those compared to maybe 2016, 2017?
It's certainly an upgrade. Mike Wallace had a good year for the Ravens last year, but Jeremy Maclin was a major disappointment. John Brown, his nickname Smokey Brown, is a playmaker that they've been looking for. Tight ends are pretty much the same group right now because the first-round rookie Hayden Hurst is currently injured, but they definitely added some weapons, and most importantly, Flacco is healthy. He suffered a back injury before the season last year, and it hindered him all year.
Yeah, so you mentioned Flacco's durability issues and his general inconsistencies. Even though he looked really good, they have Lamar Jackson at backup. He got into the game because it was a blowout. Do you expect in maybe some of these scenarios going forward, maybe you guys are up really late in the game, that Jackson gets reps, or do you also expect that there's going to be an increase in packaging plays against a team like Cincinnati who maybe struggles with speed out of the backfield?
I think we're going to see Lamar Jackson in packages right away. He actually saw maybe 5 or 6 snaps on the first few series before the Ravens had the game in hand, and they weren't particularly effective, but just giving that little eye candy to the defense, something else to distract them, something else to make them concerned about, I think is beneficial for the offense.
Talking to Bill Laricos of Baltimore Beatdown, the SB Nation Baltimore Ravens site. Happy to have him with us to preview the big Week 2 Thursday night football matchup. Ravens coming into Cincinnati, their home opener, and both teams are 1-0, and both teams had pretty nice wins this first week of the season. Bill, what does the Baltimore Raven, either fan base or those that cover the team, what's their view of the Bengals, both, I guess, right now? Because number one, we all know that the Bengals broke the Ravens' hearts in Week 17 last year. It seemed like a gimme game for the Ravens to get into the playoffs. That didn't happen. And then now the Bengals made a lot of offseason adjustments, as did the Ravens. Both teams are 1-0. Cincinnati recently, I did a little research. Cincinnati, basically since that last, if you remember, Bill, there was a Monday Night Football game in 2012 where the Ravens absolutely dominated the Bengals. Since that game, Cincinnati is 8-3 against Baltimore. So is this a team that is starting to be kind of, I don't want to say feared necessarily by the fan base, but what are kind of the thoughts of the Bengals of late amongst the Ravens faithful?
Opinions are definitely mixed. Some do not take the Bengals perhaps as seriously as they should. I personally do fear the Bengals. They've definitely given Flacco the most trouble out of any team in the entire league throughout his career. He actually has a negative touchdown interception ratio. He fares much better against Pittsburgh, New England, some of the other heavyweights. When you look at the Bengals roster, you have a lot of playmakers at receiver, an upgraded offensive line. And then on defense, that defensive line is very strong. I think that's a matchup that concerns me, frankly, tomorrow night. So I am not taking the Bengals lightly, and I can guarantee you that the Ravens, are not either.
Yeah, you mentioned the Bengals defensive line against the Ravens offensive line. My biggest fear is the Ravens defensive line against the Bengals offensive line, because there's a lot of question marks on the Bengals offensive line. And consistently, the Ravens' defensive line has given the Bengals' offensive line troubles in the past. Bengals fans typically associate the Ravens with defense, but I feel like there's been a little bit of turnover in terms of personnel on that defense in recent years. Who are a couple of guys that maybe Bengals fans aren't too aware of that they should be worried about going up against what we hope is an improved Bengals offense, but against what is still known as a very solid Ravens defense?
Sure. A couple guys, they returned basically their entire defense from last year, and the meaningful addition is the slot cornerback Tavon Young, who was hurt, tore his ACL before the season last year. He had 2 sacks last week. He's a strong cover man. I think he's going to do much better on Boyd than the Ravens were able to last year. A couple other young up-and-coming guys. Matt Judon is an outside linebacker. He's probably going to be going against your right tackle, Bobby Hart. He had, I believe, 8 sacks last year. Another edge rusher, Tim Williams, out of Alabama. Didn't do a whole lot his first year last year, but he had a fantastic preseason, brings a lot of speed. And then the other rookie, second-year player is Marlon Humphrey, the cornerback. He's really coming on in a big way. And I think most Ravens fans are hoping he'll be able to, do a pretty good job on A.J. Green while Jimmy Smith, our top corner, suspended.
I want to ask you, Bill, about a specific player, and it may seem random, but I live on the West Coast, and this guy I thought was a very good football player. He now appears to be, I think, on the Baltimore Ravens practice squad, but Nico Siragusa, offensive lineman. He went to San Diego State. I thought a very promising prospect. He was hurt. And I think that's probably playing into the situation here. But does he have a long-term future, you think, with Baltimore, or is he, or am I completely off base and he's not on your practice squad?
No, he's on the practice squad.
Okay, all right.
He was one of the final cuts. So last preseason, as I'm talking here, we're remembering how many injuries the Ravens had. He tore 3 of the 4 ligaments in his knee all at the same time, which is a very hard injury to come back from. He actually looked okay in the preseason, but he didn't quite have that stamina, and they decided to keep the backup offensive linemen, 2 or 3 of them, that had a little bit more positional versatility because he's mostly a guard. But I think the Ravens are hoping with another few months to recover that he can become a player for them down the road, or perhaps be promoted some point later in the season when they need some depth.
So what I found interesting last week is that you guys drafted Hayden Hurst in the first round, and you still had 3 tight ends who had, I believe, over 30 yards receiving against the Bills. It was Mark Andrews, Nick Doyle, and Max Williams, I believe. Did you see like one of those guys when Hurst is out establishing himself as the main guy in terms of target share? And who do you think is most likely to have a better game against the Bengals?
On tomorrow night, Thursday night, I think Nick Boyle's probably the best of the bunch right now, but I think they're going to need him to help Chip on that right side. James Hurst, the right tackles, he leaves a lot to be desired. So considering that, I think Mark Andrews probably has the best chance to break out a little bit. He's a rookie, still learning, but he did make a couple nice grabs in traffic last week. So I think he's probably the best bet.
Talking with Bill Laricos, SB Nation's Baltimore beat down the Ravens website through the network there. Bill, I mean, if you talk tight end, so obviously if you saw anything or read any of the stat lines from the Bengals game against the Colts, you would know that was a major issue for their defense this year. Well, it's been years, but this last week was a major issue. What are a couple of keys that you see? The couple of biggest keys to a Ravens victory on Thursday night as these teams square off?
Number one, it starts up front, no question. They're going to have to block that defensive line. The Ravens had James Hurst at right tackle. Somewhat surprisingly that the Ravens gave him the starting spot over rookie third-round pick Orlando Brown, who was great in the preseason. And Hurst, he had a tough game against Buffalo. He really has not played well most of his career, to be honest. And we're also breaking in a new center, Matt Skura, formerly undrafted rookie free agent. And Geno Atkins, I mean, Marshall Yanda is one of the best in the league as a guard, and Geno still gets him on occasion. You know, two All-Pros going head-to-head there. And then even some of the younger defensive ends, Willis and Lawson, I think they have some potential to do some damage. So that's the first key. Second key for me is going to be coverage of the Bengals' targets. And in particular, Tyler Eifert. The Ravens have had massive issues covering tight ends in the past. I think the new defensive coordinator is going to stack the box, do whatever he can to take away, mix in on the ground. Don't be surprised to see 7, 8, 9 guys on the line and some of that kind of organized chaos, predator-style look. And I think Eifert is going to be the outlet valve, and Tony Jefferson, the strong safety, and Eric Weddle, they're not great covering tight ends. And then I think the last is going to be turnovers. 75, 80% of the time, the team that wins a turnover battle wins the game. Joe Flacco, as we said, has had a lot of trouble protecting the ball against the Bengals. So those are probably the three keys off the top of my head.
Awesome, Bill. And before we get you out of here, your prediction on the Thursday night football game and your prediction on how the rest of the Ravens season maybe plays out, especially given now that you've seen them play a for real game in week 1.
If you want to call it that. This game could go either way. Closely matched teams. I have to give the edge to the Bengals on a short week on the road. 23-20, Cincinnati, I'll go with. As far as the regular season, I think the Ravens are going to be somewhere between 8 and 10 wins. So I think it's kind of where they are. They could, grab a wild card. Who knows? Maybe they win this game. They win the division. Pittsburgh's not looking too great right now, so we'll see. But I think they're right there where they always are, very competitive, fighting into the last couple weeks.
Yeah, first of all, we can all enjoy the Steelers' tears. I think. I think everybody can enjoy that. Secondly, even though the Bengals and Ravens are bitter rivals, personally speaking, I have an immense amount of respect for John Harbaugh. I think he's a fantastic coach, and he always has his team right in the mix towards the end. I think most fans would agree with your take in terms of the score. Either way, I think it's going to be probably pretty close, except for the fact that, my God, those Bengals just do not show up in prime time very often. So hopefully, for at least from a watchability standpoint, we'll have that to look forward to. But how can they find your stuff, Bill? Find you on social media, all of that stuff.
Absolutely. Baltimore Beatdown is a website. I go by Vasily, my full name. Last name is pronounced Laricos, and we have all kinds of content for you. At the Twitter handle is @BeMoreBeatdown, and we also put out our own podcast, Ravens Centric, twice a week with my co-host Logan Levy. It's called Take It to the Bank.
Yep, we know Logan well. He's been on this program before too, so great guy. Tell him hello. And Bill, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for your time. Enjoy the Thursday night football game tomorrow night. I think it should be a fun one. May not be the prettiest of games, but should be close, and an AFC North slobber knocker, right?
No doubt. My pleasure, guys. Take
All
care.
right.
Lots of luck with the new venture.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Take care.
That was Bill Laricos. I kind of mispronounced his last name there. I apologize, Bill. But great guest, and helping us preview the big upcoming game against the Baltimore Ravens, Cincinnati Bengals, Baltimore Ravens, and it's going to be a bit of a slugfest, I think, and we'll talk a little bit more about our takes on the Ravens game towards the end of the program, because we want to kind of get now to the Bengals win against the Colts. Actually, you know what? Let's back up a second. Let's back up.
All the way back.
Yeah, all the way back. No, we have been. There's been a number of different big announcements on this program over the past couple of weeks, maybe month. Some of which have been in the form of great guests, Bill Laricos being one, a couple of Bengals greats, Anthony Munoz, Willie Anderson being others. But we now have a little bit more news, and it really shouldn't affect our listeners too much, I don't think, at all. It's still a little new to John and I in terms of logistics, but this podcast has been officially picked up by the SB Nation National Network of podcasts, and we kind of hinted at it last week that was maybe something that we were looking at doing, but it helps us expand our growth. It helps us, get potentially more listeners into the program, get you, the listeners, more guests, different guests, and higher quality. I know. Luckily, we've cleaned up a lot of the sound issues in the past couple of weeks, but that's been a couple of times that's been an issue. So we want to make sure we give you the most high quality program. We think that the official support of SB Nation behind this as a national, Vox Media's SB Nation behind this podcast will make it a great one. And, we hope to continue to bring you good stuff. And I'm very pleased that my co-host John Sheeran is officially on board to continue this show. So John, your thoughts on the new venture here? It's a little, we're kind of dipping our toes in the water. It's a little nerve-wracking, but I think it's overall definitely for the best, right?
And this doesn't happen without, hundreds of people, thousands of people listening every week and supporting us and giving us good thoughts and participating on the show. I think that's what makes the show great, is that we have listeners who are engaging in the conversation. And I think some of our best content, at least since I've been on here, is just interacting with those listeners and creating good discourse about the team that we all follow. So as long as we have that continued support, we should be good to go. And we hope that we can continue to earn your support going forward, and while we try to make this a lot better going forward.
Yeah, absolutely echo those sentiments. And this is a listener driven show. I mean, we come on here and we talk about things and we give our opinion and analysis, but we really try and get the opinions and the questions from our listeners. And I will say this, not only the listeners of this show and the readers of Cincy Jungle, many are both. Bengals fans are very, very well educated in football, and they're very passionate, and they can sometimes be a little knee-jerk reactionist, myself included. But they are some of the more well-educated, at least from my opinion, more well-educated fan bases. They know a bit more of the X's and O's than the casual NFL fan, and I think we appreciate that, and we appreciate the support of many of you who have been listening to this show either from day one or recently, whatever the case may be. Maybe you just stumbled upon it because SB Nation put out an announcement on Wednesday about this. So we're excited about it. The format of the show really won't change. We're still going to be talking, or we'll be talking Bengals. We'll be doing all that stuff. Nothing. It's just it's going to be available on more platforms, and I think we're going to get a little bit more accessibility to higher profile guests and whatnot, which is a plus for us in the program. And obviously, I'm stoked that John's on board. We will probably still be having our old co-host from time to time, Scott Schultz. He probably will still be popping in and checking in with us here and there. So we're, Still similar show, same show, just little, new platform and all that kind of stuff. So you can still get this show on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube. We're on Stitcher, the Google Play app, all that good stuff, and that's going to continue. There's also a new platform called Art19, ART19, where our stuff will also be housed, and I believe that's going to be accessible through for our listeners as well. So just another additional platform for folks to get this program. But we thank you for your support. This program would not be growing without talent like John and Scott and other great guests we've had on this program, as well as the great amount of listeners that we have. And obviously now what's kind of cool for us is we've seen an increase in downloads and all that kind of stuff because the team is doing better and because excitement was high this preseason and this offseason. So we're reaping the benefits a little bit, which we're stoked about, but we appreciate all of your support. And we wanted to make that announcement official since it literally came out today, being Wednesday. That's when we usually record. So yeah, anyway, good stuff. And appreciate the support. Can't thank you enough. John, let's now again rewind. We'll rewind it again a little bit, just because for Bill's availability, we had to start off with previewing the Ravens game, which was awesome. He brought the knowledge. I love it, and he's a pretty realistic Ravens fan. I like that. But let's backtrack to week one. Okay, and I guess we could start big picture and narrow it down a little bit. Big picture question that I want to start off with for you, and again, it's kind of one we've asked before in the preseason and all of that. But what do you make of the win here? Because Andy Dalton's first pass attempt, good Lord, I mean that was just I was honestly like, really. Really? And we'll talk more about the offensive line. Billy Price was involved in that play, and there's some conflicting things about that. But they start off that way. Then they come right back and get the interception on Andrew Luck's his first statistical pass. His other pass was batted away, and then there's a penalty, all that kind of stuff. Right. So then they get the ball back. They move down the field. Then you're going, okay. Then there's a little bit of back and forth, and all of a sudden then the Bengals are looking at a 13-point second half deficit. And you're going, what has happened to this team? What's going on? And then a flurry of big plays occur. Touchdown to AJ Green, big plays from Joe Mixon, and then he capped it off with a 1-yard touchdown run, and then of course the Clayton Fedulum strip recovery and touch. So what do you make of this win? Is this, hey, way to show fortitude, way to come back? This team has a lot of talent, especially, at those skill positions on offense, to be able to come back from any deficit? Or is this, hey, we don't even really know who the Colts are at this point. Andrew Luck hasn't played football in a year. Let's pump the brakes on the optimism. Or is it a little bit of both? I don't know.
11-point victory on the road, week one, shouldn't really be overshadowed and diminished for what it is. And I think we have to give the team credit for that in big picture wise, because 34 points on the road in a venue that they haven't won since I was 1 year old.
Oh my God.
Is actually insane to me. So from that standpoint, yeah, big picture, it was a good win. Obviously, it's not 100% positive. There's still glaring issues on this team. And I think that we saw an offense that looks exactly like what it is, and it's an extremely talented one with one or two glaring weaknesses that have the potential of drastically diminishing their performance overall. Luckily, it didn't happen because the Colts defense isn't that good. And the biggest thing, I think, is that Bengals fans know that the Bengals' talent has never been an issue in terms of winning football games. It's usually just been mental fortitude, coaching, lack of second half adjustments. But this was just a game where we saw the more talented team see that talent take over when it meant the most, and that was converting third downs. It was stopping Andrew Luck on a illegal sack after an unfortunate penalty. It was AJ Green overcoming his mistakes late in the game. It was Joe Mixon continuing all throughout the game to look like a first-round pick that he probably should have been without off-field issues aside. And it was just, it was Clayton Fedulum stepping up and Sean Williams' absence when he got ejected and making the play of the game. It was all these things that, we don't usually see the Bengals typically do. We kind of see that talent overshadowed by a lot of, mental mistakes that end up making them lose. And that was just not the case. And on the road, week 1, I think we have to give credit where credit's due.
I agree with you. And I do waver on this a bit, okay? Because I look at it and I go, okay, vast improvement from the run game and Joe Mixon from last year. Yes, Joe Mixon had, I think, 1 or 2 100-yard rushing games last year, but took far more attempts, and he was just consistently getting yards, just far more consistent. I thought Cordy Glenn, and we'll talk more about that, about the offensive lineman and defensive lineman, the weekly lineman with John Sheeran in a little bit. I thought Cordy Glenn played very well. I like the fact that, and the positive side is you look at, I was looking at last year's schedule and results. They had 4 of their 9 losses were of one possession or, minimal points, right? Yeah. And in at least 3 of those, in those games I'm talking about, Titans, Steelers, I'm blanking now, but Packers and Texans. Packers and Texans. Okay, those are all one possession losses that they suffered last year. They had oftentimes in those games, especially Pittsburgh and Green Bay, they had big leads and let them go. Mm-hmm. This time they fell behind and clawed all the way back and got in it. And that to me is a very big switch of mentality that I like to see. And I saw a lot of, even though they were down, I saw a lot of high effort plays. And I think none more maybe than a couple from Tyler Boyd, jumping on yet another AJ Green fumble late in the game, extending a play with AJ Green to convert a huge 3rd down later in the game. And those are things that go overlooked, but you see it and you go, okay, those are high effort plays. And in those games, especially the ones where the Bengals got blown out last year, you didn't see that kind of stuff. You saw a lot of guys that hung their heads and all that kind of stuff. Now, where I waver on the other side is theoretically the Bengals had a 4-point lead, I believe, late in the game, and Luck is driving. They're driving, and even up to the point of the Doyle fumble, it was a 3rd and 15. And if he doesn't fumble that ball, he's got a 1st down. Mm-hmm. He's right there. They let it happen again. That's a little worrisome because then that turns into, I think he had 40 seconds, 30 seconds, something like that to try and get into the end zone. Now we know getting into the end zone in shortened areas of the field is, it can be difficult, but I think a little bit, you say an 11-point win on the road. Yeah, on paper, that looks great, but this game was a lot closer than the score. And that's what makes me a little bit hesitant. And, we don't know how good the Colts are going to be. I mentioned it earlier with Bill, week 1's kind of a wild card in terms of what by the way, if anybody is in a survivor pool and you pick the New Orleans Saints like this idiot right here did, that'll tell you a lot about week 1. But I don't know. Am I just overreacting? Have I been a fan too long? Have I watched too much Bengals football and I'm being hypercritical? Or is that something where you go, I don't know.
Not at all. Not at all. Because those losses last year, as you mentioned, the Packers and Steelers specifically, they had leads. But the NFL is such a quarterback-driven league, and in those 2 games, the Bengals obviously had the lesser quarterback in facing Aaron Rodgers and Ben Roethlisberger. That was the same case on week 1. Andrew Luck, even if he hasn't played football in a while, is a more talented quarterback than Andy Dalton. And Andrew Luck's playing at home. He's playing, with a lead. It's a situation that definitely favored the Colts. And yeah, you have to give credit to the Bengals for coming back and doing something that they don't normally do, and that's beat a team with a better quarterback. But again, 11 points, 7 of those came on the final seconds off of a fumble recovery for a touchdown. I don't know if the Colts get in the end zone there because the Bengals defense is so predicated off of bending and not breaking, and typically some of those drives ended in field goals. But if you have reservations about this win, I totally understand because I'm still on the fence about whether this team has truly changed. This is just a good step forward in the right direction, but there's still plenty of more tests that they have to overcome, because again, we saw those issues early on that they were able to come back, this time, but in other games against more talented teams, that may not be the case.
Yeah, and as we mentioned earlier, huge test this Thursday night already in the Baltimore Ravens, and it's a team that the Bengals have fared well against recently, but it's still going to be a tough game. And again, we talked about, and this is something we'll talk about in a little bit, about the Ravens. When we talk just a tiny bit, you and I, about the Ravens game, the primetime thing. At some point you got to be able to get past it. You got to be able to win those games against those good teams and not clench up. That's why I think a good performance and potentially a win this Thursday will go a long way in kind of seeing how the Bengals season will go in 2018. But I want to talk a little bit about, and this will be part of our Colts recap, the John Sheeran Weekly Lineman. By the way, if you haven't seen this on CincyJungle.com, it's a great post that John does every week. At least every week there's a game. And he actually has got some fancy new graphics on the post there. I don't know who was in charge of doing that.
Shout out to Rebecca Tobach.
Yeah, this is some fancy schmancy. So Rebecca's come up. By the way, Rebecca has come up clutch for this show as well. She helped introduce us to Willie Anderson to get that interview going. So props to her. But anyway, if you haven't watched it, really cool thing from John here. I want to talk about, and it's based obviously about the offensive lineman and the defensive lineman. And what I like about this is such an X's and O's thing. Everybody, it's so easy to concentrate on the quarterback and the skill positions and the linebacker, guys that you see play more in space. Sorry, we're, I think we're getting a little bit of a call there, but we're going to open up the phone lines in a little bit, guys. You got to be patient.
Come on, guys. We're talking right now.
We're going to open up the phone lines towards the end. So whoever you are, call back, but I'll prompt you a couple minutes before. I promise. But what I was saying is, what's kind of cool is this is something that you really do quite a bit of research in and a lot of film study in, based on some of the guys. It's the trench work. It's stuff that gets overlooked. It's stuff that gets bypassed in terms of, what the casual NFL fan or a casual fan of a team sometimes doesn't see. And I guess where I want to start is let's start with the defensive line. Okay. I thought Geno Atkins played very well against a guard that is going to probably be a very, very good player for a long time in Quentin Nelson. Probably the best player in the 2018 draft, to be honest with you, in terms of solid, ready to play right now, all that, and long-term viability. I thought he played pretty well against Quentin Nelson. Mm-hmm. And vice versa. I mean, they kind of had a little bit of a battle, but I think Geno had a couple of nice plays. Carlos Dunlap also had a bunch of nice plays, albeit one on a really phantom penalty call. Why don't you talk about those two guys and maybe what you saw out of them and your thoughts on, and maybe not an expletive-laced rant on the penalty.
It was a lot what we've seen in years past with Geno and Dunlap kind of carrying the defensive line in terms of generating pressure. Dunlap had a great matchup off the right edge against I believe it was Jamarcus Webb at right tackle, and obviously that's favorable to Dunlap, and he got around him off the edge in his typical finesse approach. And I mean the one late hit on Luck's knee, it's whatever. It's just the nature of the game now, especially with Luck coming back from injury. But Dunlap played well. Obviously, he did end up getting an illegal sack after that landing on the quarterback with the full weight and stuff. But Geno and Nelson was very intriguing because it was just a case of, like, the tape that Nelson had wasn't bad. It was just Geno is on a whole nother level than 99% of defensive tackles are in the NFL. And it's just a matter of Nelson being 22 and him going up against, college three techniques and, destroying them in pass protection. and Gino being 30 years old and being, the beast of a man he is. And you just saw that difference of NFL strength, welcome to the NFL, Quentin Nelson. It was not anything bad that Nelson really did. It was just he
how
just
good
never,
Gino is, right?
he's just never faced anything like that before. So he held his own. He can hold his head high because Gino only ended up getting like one real sack, but it was just Gino being Gino, and I'm so glad that he's locked up.
Yeah, and it's we talked about I kind of feel foolish about it now, but a couple episodes ago, we're talking about, hey, are these guys worth their contracts? They're getting older. And all of a sudden they come out and just explode in week one. On the flip side, this Bengals defensive front has often been vaunted for its and praised for its depth, and rightfully so. There's a lot of talent there. Carl Lawson had a breakout year last year. Jordan Willis seems to be a guy who is very talented. Then they drafted and added Sam Hubbard up front. Ryan Glasgow is kind of a defensive tackle that can get in the backfield. But a lot of those, Glasgow had a couple of nice plays. Willis had a pressure, I believe, and a quarterback hit. But really, really quiet day from the rest of those guys. And, that's definitely not going to be a weekly thing. But I was kind of concerned about it. Did I miss some bigger plays from these guys, maybe in terms of pressures and stuff like that? Or was it just, hey, somehow they got shut down? Sam Hubbard was the guy who was, I think, in a fullback when Mixon had his touchdown. So cool. But
it was like, I think if Bengals fans look back in the game and they think of how the Colts offense looked, it was like the first kind of play that comes to mind is just like Luck, kind of evading in the pocket and throwing over the middle. And that was basically the theme of the Colts offense the whole entire game. It was Luck extending time on his own, maneuvering around the pocket and finding a way to get the ball out. And part of that was because the Bengals defensive line was winning most of their one-on-ones. It was just they're facing a very mobile quarterback who's able to extend time there. And unfortunately, this time the Bengals defensive line, like Lawson and Johnson and Willis, they didn't end up finishing their pressures and stuff, and so it looks bad on the box score, but on the film, kind of tells a different story. But regardless, those guys definitely need to step up and going forward. And I think against a quarterback like Flacco, who's not the mobile guy like Luck, they might have a better chance at that. But I think with Hubbard, like Terrell Austin said, like he wanted to get him in the game more because they only put like 7 snaps on defense, but. And he wanted to get in the game more because, guys were tiring out. But, yeah, like that was the whole thing. Like the defense was out there for 82 snaps and Hubbard only gets on 7. It was kind of weird to me how he didn't end up getting the rotation to like the final series of the defense. And that's going to be key because Glasgow was the only other active defensive tackle behind Gino and Billings, and he ended up playing both nose tackle and 3 technique. So definitely want to see Hubbard get more snaps inside to rotate in with Johnson at defensive tackle and defensive end going forward.
Yeah, I saw them, and wisely so. They kicked Johnson inside. I think that's a role that, maybe first down, what have you, he can contribute against the run, and then nickel situations, you bring him in again on the interior, and he could be an effective player. We saw that happen on a few occasions last year. I guess, offensive line. What I saw, there are so many charts and things that I've seen, and I have quoted them on some of the posts I put up, the analysis posts on Cincy Jungle. The left side of the line, I thought, played pretty outstanding. Billy Price up and down, and the right side of the line. Now, I did see some nice pulls from Alex Redmond, Billy Price. I saw them get out in space and make some nice blocks to spring Joe Mixon on some of those plays, which is great because last year that wasn't the case. First play of the game, Billy Price looks to get bowled over to cause that terrible interception by Dalton. If you follow Dan Horde on Twitter, he posted a video, I believe it was on Wednesday, showing that he may have, as he was absorbing the block, tripped over Clint Bowling's foot. Regardless, not a good look. But I thought he played better than Bodine mostly ever did for the team. I don't know your thoughts about the play up front. I thought Glenn was very good. I thought Bowling is his usual self. I think he had a penalty though, which was he had a false start, which was a bummer. But They were, if you look at the chart of how they were running in yards per carry average to the left, was amazing. So your thoughts on that?
I think your assessment is spot on with what we're going to see going forward, just because it's hard for these guys to really change who they are. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about Bobby Hart. It's hard to allow Marcus Hunt 2 sacks in the game, but Hart made light work of that and gave him a career game with that. I think what we saw is going to be kind of how they're going to operate with this going forward, and that's doing things normally when running to the left, but when running to the right, I think they're going to prioritize getting both Price and Redmond out in space, because I don't think they can just run simple outside zone to the right without exposing Redmond and Hart specifically, and also Price for getting breach blocks on those noses. I think power schemes with Price and Redmond and zone on the left is going to be kind of the thesis going forward with the running game. I mean, it definitely worked against the Colts, but the Colts don't have exactly a great run defense, and we'll see how good they are against the Ravens, who are much more formidable and much more experienced facing that unit. Pass protection wise, what we saw is probably what we're going to get, and that was Dalton getting the ball out really quickly on most of those plays. But another problem with in the past in pass protection was that receivers weren't getting separation early in the routes, and that forced Dalton to hold on to the ball a little bit longer than he should, and protection doesn't hold up for more than 3 seconds with bad offensive line, and sacks and pressures are allowed. But now we have receivers and John Ross and Tyler Boyd and obviously Green and Eifert who are getting open quicker, and plays are developing much faster, and protection doesn't they aren't exposed to the level that they were in the past couple of years, but they're still getting the ball out in these quick slants and screens and RPOs, and that's obviously going to help the offensive line get into a rhythm and not allowing any of these pressures. But what we saw talent-wise and how they looked is probably how we're going to see them for the rest of the year, unless they make some crazy acquisition out of the blue.
Yeah, I felt like I was being pretty hard on Andy Dalton, which I guess is easy to come by. You look at his stats: 75% completion percentage, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, the 1 terrible interception, and 109.7 rating on the road. I mean, this has a little bit to do with alignment, but are you at least encouraged by that and what you saw in terms of protection schemes and his ability to hit? He hit 3 tight ends as well. It was Owen Croft, Tyler Eifert. It was great to see Tyler Eifert make some catches, take some hits, and get right back up. John Ross, 1 catch, 1 touchdown, already surpassing his rookie totals in both of those categories. AJ Green, not a great day in terms of ball security, but made an incredible catch in the end zone for a touchdown, as well as some others across the middle and whatnot. Are you encouraged by schemes drawn up and how some of these guys at the skill positions performed based on that?
I think Bill Lazor made a statement, and that was, the opening script was amazing with the offense. Unfortunately, it didn't last throughout the first half because of a couple turnovers, but I think he's doing a great job of getting these guys, using their strengths. They had Eifert running a wheel route out of the fullback play action, which was incredible to see. They used Green and Boyd very well out of the slot and out of the X respectively. And I obviously Mixon did wonders with what they gave him on the ground. With Dalton specifically, I think his completion percentage was a little bit skewed. I don't think he was as accurate down the stretch as he was. I think there were a couple plays where Green and Mixon with those one-hand catch kind of bailed him out in a couple scenarios. Yeah. But I think that's it. They're so talented at receiver and running back and tight end that it might not matter. They have guys who have insane catch radiuses and insane separation skills that Dalton doesn't have to be Aaron Rodgers type precision level of accuracy in order to get, what was it, like 75, 72 completion percentage going forward. But this is kind of who Andy Dalton is. He's not precise, but he'll get it in the area. And as long as he has the talent around him that can make those incredible catches, then it should be fine going forward.
Yeah, and a nice comeback win for him. That he didn't start off the game well, as we mentioned, but and then other guys didn't do him any favors. But they put it together, they won. So you got to like that. Overall grade, if you had to grade the Bengals defensive line and their play, and the offensive line and the group's play.
I would go B minus for defensive line because they shut down a non-existent running game, and they did better than I think the box score would indicate in terms of pass rushing. Offensive line, I would go C, average. I think for the most part, they kept ball clean. They had like a handful of obvious mishaps and pressures and whatnot, but run blocking was good. And I think I think Mixon losing 10 pounds over the offseason really made a difference. He seemed much more nimble and maybe made some run blocking look a little better than what it was. But I would go C minus for the Bengals offensive line.
Okay, fair enough. And I think most fans could agree with that. And I think if the Bengals can up that offensive line to a B minus C plus area throughout most of the season, I think this team will be okay. You got to understand there are 4 new starters on this offensive line, so things aren't, regardless of what you may think about talent level on the right side or what have you. Number one, very few teams employ first round picks at every single offensive line position, and this it's a unit that needs to build cohesion and whatnot. And again, like I said, 4 new starters, and we'll see. Do you think that the Bengals get an itchy trigger finger if things aren't looking well on the right side this week in terms of right tackle, maybe Jake Fisher, maybe Trey Hopkins? I don't know. Do you think that happens, or do you think they're going to just say, hey, let's stick with what we've got. Let's try and build that cohesion?
I don't know, because Frank Pollock didn't really have to go through this in Dallas, so I'm not sure if there's a precedent with him. Because he's there, like we saw last year, like they did that with Paul Alexander, but he's not here anymore, so we just don't really know if the staff is going to have that. But we saw last year, Zampese didn't score a touchdown in 2 games, he was out. So if Bobby Hart plays as bad as he did against a much better Ravens pass rush, with a longer rest and more time to prepare for the Panthers in week 3, we could see Jake Fisher or Cedric Way at right tackle week 3 if Hart doesn't improve. And I guess that is a possibility. I can't say with any conviction that it's likely under an offensive line coach that we just don't have a lot of exposure to.
Yeah. Well, good stuff as always, John. Good stuff on the Weekly Lineman. It's on CincyJungle.com, and it is we're going to try and make this a regular part of our program as well, because I think it's very worthwhile, and you do a lot of in-depth analysis, and it's stuff that those are 2 position groups, even though they're not the sexiest position groups. Those are 2 position groups that a lot of Bengals fans are watching this year for a variety of reasons, both because of talent and because of new faces and all of that stuff. So good stuff from you. I appreciate it. We're going to open up the phone line in just give us 2 or 3 minutes, guys, and we will open up. You can send in a text now for sure. But if you're going to call in, give us 2 minutes. 949-542-6241. If you're joining us live, is the text line and the phone line. You can call us or shoot us a text. We're also available on Twitter at BengalsOBI, and we have the live comment stream on CincyJungle.com. So we appreciate it. Or if you don't feel like calling or texting, you can leave your questions in the live YouTube chat. So do that. And if you are a listener after the fact, you can join us live every week via YouTube and or CincyJungle.com. You can check us out there. As always, you can download the program on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, CincyJungle.com, the Google Play app, Stitcher, and you can also get it on Art19, I believe now. So check that out. That's one of our new platforms that's been adopted under the SB Nation network. So check that out. Again, we'll be taking calls, and we're taking texts. We'll be taking calls as well in just a couple minutes. 949-542-6241 is the number to call. So let's talk, before we get to some of these listener questions, John, let's talk a little bit about this game coming up against the Ravens. I struggle with where to begin in terms of what to talk about with this game, especially since we had some great insight from Bill Laricos earlier, or Laricos, I believe it was. I guess, again, we'll go macro and bring it down a little bit. How important it's an early game. It's a division early game in the season in the schedule. It's against a division foe, a team that is also 1-0. But how important is it for this team, for the Bengals, to win this game? Are people going to be like, now I'm out, I'm off the bandwagon, or is this just, hey, still early, a young team that'll progress as the season goes on? I don't know.
I think fans have to keep a conservative approach either way, because 2-0 is great, and it typically, it's not a guarantee for the playoffs, but significantly more increases your chances than if you're 0-2 or 1-1. And that's just like something that we've seen in the past 10 years. But yeah, it's a division game. It's at night. It's not technically primetime because it's on NFL Network, but whatever. It's a primetime game for all we're concerned about. And it's against a team that has, 9 months ago, we knocked them out of the playoffs. And they're definitely going to have that mentality, this team wronged us and we're trying to even the score. So I think all those factors in there, it is an important game for just the culture of the team and the message that they were trying to convey this entire offseason. This is one of their first tests to see, okay, are they legit? Because it is a short week. It's a home opener. They got the Super Bowl. They got the Super Bowl team all there, pregame, and we saw an embarrassment in this exact week last year against a rookie quarterback in Deshaun Watson. Now we have a quarterback who the Bengals typically do well against, and a quarterback who doesn't do well against this defense. It's a game that, talent-wise, again, I think they're more talented than the Ravens, but this is a division game, and the Bengals offense doesn't, or Dalton in particular in recent years doesn't do well against divisional opponents. All those factors combined, I think if they win, it's great, but you shouldn't put your bets into the Super Bowl. Depending on how they win. If they lose, then it's just coming off a short week against a division opponent who maybe has more to play for in terms of them missing the playoffs because of us last year. So I think people just have to take a step back afterwards and just not go all the way on each side depending on what happens.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier the last time these two faced off on primetime was the first week of the 2012 season. Very, very bad result. Granted, it was in Baltimore, but very, very bad result for the Bengals. I think the end score was 44-13. They got absolutely shellacked on primetime. But since Bengals are 8-3, and it's one of those things where Marvin Lewis, he's just done well against the Browns. Who hasn't? He's done well against the Ravens. He has not done well against Pittsburgh at all. But he has found a formula that, before his arrival, the Bengals were awful against Baltimore as well when he was defensive coordinator. So, he's found a formula to have a winning equation against the team. Do you buy into that?
Yeah, I think I do, and I don't think it's specifically because he's coached there before. I think it's just some of the specifically on the defensive side of the ball. I think the Ravens have never been that good at scoring, and with Flacco at the helm, and obviously he's had receiver troubles in the past and whatnot. But now they have new receivers, and maybe we'll see a different Ravens offense facing off against the Bengals, and maybe with those new factors in, we see something different from them. But typically history kind of prevails when we're talking about the Bengals, and it'll just be a test. This is the game that they should win. This is a team that they're more talented than, and I think that their success should continue. It's just a matter of, okay, are they actually going to do it then?
Yep, and the primetime thing is a pretty big deal. We've got a call on the line, John, as we're talking a little bit about the Ravens game. It's Terrell. I believe he's called into the show before. Terrell, how are you, sir?
How you doing? Both of y'all, glad to see both of y'all.
Yeah, it's good to be seen,
Yeah, I know. Just real quick, two quick questions. Basically, I think I've been real hard on Marvin Lewis, but I gotta tell you, man, I think he really gained some guts this year and grow some. And it's just I really feel that the new coaches, I think that he listening to him, and did we really just witness that Mark Lewis actually had a second half adjustment? I mean, come on, it's just and then you starting two rookies in the first game. I just feel like he putting the best players out there. I mean, I know we all want a Western though, but he putting the best players out there though.
Yeah, good stuff, Terrell. I'm going to let John answer your question and take it off the air. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think with Marvin coming back, I guess people maybe have thought that maybe he's gotten more power and more influence in the organization. And with that, it's kind of been an inverse effect, whereas we're seeing more influence from maybe more the positional coaches and the offensive coordinators kind of taking over their schemes and their views on how the team should be operated with and whatnot. And I think we kind of saw that in week one. We saw Bill Lazor's offense completely, his completely new scheme, take fold of 27 points. We saw Taurasi have not as much success, but still some positive signs from a talented personnel. Frank Pollock's influence on the offensive line was clearly seen with, what he's gotten out of new additions and whatnot. So yeah, I think there was some, tangible differences just from week one, what we saw from Marvin. But again, it is week one and he's been here for 16 years. And typically I like to take the history over just this past game. But regardless, maybe we're seeing that change and week one was a good start.
Yeah, and if you listen to our interview with Anthony Munoz, he was very high on the Bengals assistant coaches. He was a guy who was really adamant about the hires that Terrell Austin and all of that he thought were great hires and would help Marvin Lewis out immensely. So great points by Terrell there. I believe we have a good old friend from a long time ago on the line, a gentleman, well, maybe not so long ago, a gentleman who used to call in a previous podcast I was involved with. Is it John from Kentucky?
That would be me. How's it going, Anthony?
It's going well, sir. It's been too long since I've heard from you.
Oh, it's good. And I'm glad I got to call in tonight. Yeah, I remember you with Mickey Metzer and Nick Superling.
Oh, yeah.
And those were that was a pretty good podcast back then. And I want to thank you for continuing the tradition, I guess I should say. You've picked it up where they left off, and I'm glad to be able to call in tonight.
Well, I appreciate the compliment there. Obviously, those guys, they're the true. They laid the path out and taught me a lot about podcasting and all of that. I still keep in touch with those guys. And Nick has gone on and done another soccer podcast for the FC Cincinnati team. So if you're into soccer, definitely check out that podcast. But great. I'm so glad that you are still continuing to listen to what I do in this podcast. What can we answer for you tonight?
Well, I guess tomorrow night with the Ravens, Cincinnati tends to have Baltimore's number most of the time. And I think the Bengals will edge out a win. And what do you think? Would you say that? And also, by the way, I know we're all surprised Marvin Lewis is back, but do you see him improving? Because I thought the second half adjustments that happened on Sunday were something I've rarely ever seen from the Bengals under Marvin Lewis, and I hope that continues. Yeah,
I agree with you on the. One could debate what the adjustments were. It kind of depends, but definitely a different team in the second half, and I'll let John talk too. But before we get you off the air, John, I just want to ask, even though it's been, and I don't normally ask the callers questions, but I want to ask you, since you've been on other programs of ours, and I've talked to you a number of times. Do you feel, even though it's just one game, do you feel a bit different about this team than you have over the past 2 years when it's been a little bit of lackadaisical? So I'm gonna kind of flip your question on you before I let my co-host talk about it as well, because I thought I mentioned, I don't know if you heard this in the program, John. I mentioned that the Bengals had four of their 9 losses last year were by one possession. And a couple of those, I think most of them, if not all, they had big leads and they let them go. Whereas this week was a lot different in the fact that they were down 13 points in the second half, came back, rallied, and like you said, maybe it was the adjustments, maybe it was an attitude thing. I don't know, but are you feeling better about this team than you did in 2016, 2017, just based off of this one game?
Yes, I am. I have been watching the Bengals for quite a long time, and Marvin Lewis has been here 15 years, and Lewis, he'll have a bad year, maybe two, but then he normally rebounds.
Yeah.
And the team tends to get a winning season, and they tend to get in the playoffs. And I sense that happening this year. The team looks pretty good. Now, I know some people are arguing that this one guy, what's in the heart off the offensive line, is pretty bad. He did get beat by Marcus Hunt. So, look, I don't know if Hart is that bad or if Marcus Hunt has just improved his game. I mean, it's hard to say. The first game of the season, that's hard to say. Maybe a little of both.
Probably.
So, but yeah, I'm feeling better about the team this season than I was last season for sure. And I'll jump way ahead here. All I can ask from the team is something that they have been able to do in the past, and that is have their first playoff game in Paul Brown Stadium, and I want it to be against Pittsburgh. For some reason, the only time the Bengals have played good in the playoffs was the fourth quarter against Pittsburgh because they really got tired of being smacked around. And that playoff game, 3 years ago, was the best game of the entire playoff season that year. It was better than the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
It was the game to watch.
Yeah, it was, and for a variety of reasons, both positive and negative. John, I'm going to let my co-host John Sheeran talk a little bit about your question as well. Thanks so much for calling in, John. Great to hear from you. Everything going well?
Everything's going great, man. I'll try to call in the next podcast, and good luck tomorrow night, and who dey?
All right, thanks, buddy. It's John from Kentucky, long time connection in my podcast history. Very cool stuff. Quite honestly, I think I've spoken with John or heard from him for about the past 4 or 5 years. So I'm pretty cool, and he's an awesome guy. He sometimes I don't know if he still does it, but he's a trucker and listens to he does the late night stuff. And anyway, listens to the podcast. So your thoughts on what he had to say about second half adjustments and all of that, John?
Again, it's because kind of a similar question to Terrell. I'll kind of give a similar answer. It's week one, and I typically like to think that Marvin Lewis is who Marvin Lewis is, and while things might be a little bit different, this is still he still does things a similar way, and again, like they don't have problems beating less talented teams, and the Colts are definitely that, and they might not have a problem beating the Ravens because they're not at the talent level the Bengals are, despite beating the Bills by 44. So again, it's hard for me to completely jump ship and drink the Kool-Aid and think that Marvin Lewis has completely changed after 15 years as the Bengals head coach. But again, it was good to see, and I think John is probably the only person in the world Bengals fan in the world who would like to see the Bengals play the Steelers in the playoffs anytime soon.
Yeah, and I feel bad. I should have asked him how he feels about. Well, yeah, but I feel bad about. He is an old school Bengals fan. I'd like to hear his thoughts about the Bengals getting their 30th anniversary team on the field this week. So we have one more caller here. It's Jason Von Stein. Jason, how are you, sir?
I'm doing really well. It's nice to hear from John here. Guys, we're doing the Superling days.
Yeah, the Superling days. I like that. The Superling days. Yeah. Well, what can we answer for you tonight?
Well, actually, I kind of just calling to talk about my dad. It's okay to change subjects for a second.
Sure.
He's a songwriter. He's written over 5,000 songs. It's actually ironic that John just called in because I could use John's help. So my dad, he's written all these songs, but he has emphysema. So we can't play his music anymore. Strumming a guitar is too much exertion when it comes to that kind of thing. So I've been playing his music out now. I live in Atlanta. We're going to beat Atlanta in a few weeks. I live in Atlanta, and he lives in Chattanooga, so I stream the shows, and I record all the shows so he can watch it. But actually, I need someone to drive trucks. One of the songs that he does is called "The Place That I Belong," and it's a truck driver's song. And I need like bits on the road. So if you're listening, John, get in touch with me, and I can put a video together.
Cool. Yeah. Connect maybe via the YouTube chat and all of that. And obviously we love promoting what our listeners and other guests do. We definitely want to help you out. So I know you've contacted us a couple times about that with your dad and what you're doing, which I think is really cool. Any Bengals related questions we can answer for you before we get you off the air?
My biggest question is, when are we going to have 1980 Bengals throwback jersey?
Oh man.
What is going on? Why do we not do anything? We have the coolest jersey.
So are you talking here? That's a good question. So are you talking like 1980 where it had like the Bengals lettering on the side of an orange helmet, or are you talking like just the old school like Boomer Esiason, plain black jersey, just a little bit of striping on the one side? And
yeah, I'd be happy with any throwback, but if we can get the Esiason throwbacks, I'm from Virginia, and we didn't have a team, and that's why I'm a Bengals fan, and that's the jersey that made me a fan of the Bengals. That helmet with that jersey.
Yeah.
So we got these stupid white panels like down the side. It just doesn't make any sense.
Preach.
We should be like representing that, right?
Yep, I agree. We're gonna talk a little bit more about this off the air. Thanks, Jason. If there's something we could do to promote what you and your dad are doing, hit me up offline, theobinsider@gmail.com or on Twitter or something, and I'll see what I can do to help promote what you're doing.
Thank you very, very much. While you're listening, his name is Jim Bonstein. You check out Kickstarter, the Jim Bonstein 5,000 Song Project. The Kickstarter made for him last year. And that ended with me being able to make a music video for him on Christmas called Streets of Chicago, which is on YouTube.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, give him our best for sure.
I certainly will. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you so much for keeping doing what you do.
All right, thanks, buddy. Really, if he, yeah, so check out what Jason is doing for his dad. Kind of cool. But really, if you listen to what Willie Anderson said last week in our interview in terms of throwback stuff, in terms of honoring past, and in terms of all that stuff, as long as Mike Brown's there, I'm not sure that that's happening, right?
No, it's not. Anything in the past besides the operation of the team, anything honoring things that happened before Mike was here, it's just not going to happen. And it's a shame because every team with history around the league has at least once donned a throwback jersey, and the Bengals have literally the best throwback jerseys of all time, and we've never seen since they've changed in 2004. So it's a shame, but no, probably not going to happen.
All right. Yeah, and I mean, hell, I thought it was kind of creative that they did the color rush in week 1. I thought that was like, what? That was risky for Mike Brown, but there's a lot of cool stuff that the team could do, Ring of Honor and all that stuff aside. We talked, and if you want to know more about that and hear a little bit of insight about being a Bengal and a Bengals great, go check out our interview last week with Willie Anderson. I thought it was pretty cool, but there are older uniforms they could do. There's the old school where it had the Bengals literally written across the side of the orange helmet. They had the 1980s deal. They could do that, and God, I mean, they could probably do that and sell more stuff out of the pro shop. I mean, it would probably help them. So I don't know. Who knows? I don't expect it to happen anytime soon, but we'll see. Let's get out of here with this, John. I know we're running a tiny bit over. It's a text message we received, and it is it's kind of going to go into my asking you of your prediction and how this game's going to go on Thursday night. It's from Mixon, and I don't know if Mixon's a screen name or not, but it's from Mixon. And it says, do you expect Andy Dalton to have a good game under the lights? Baltimore Ravens, we've seen him against the Ravens. I will say this. He and AJ Green have had some gigantic game against this team. And I go back to, I think it was at week 3 in 2015. That game again, they were down, and then they came back, and there was that crazy throw he made to AJ Green where he broke like 3 tackles, and that game was nuts.
Yeah.
There was a 2014 overtime game where they took it to overtime on a Hail Mary to AJ Green, if you remember that one. So I expect that connection to be working and working well, but does that mean Andy Dalton has a good overall game because he doesn't normally play well in prime time? And then what do you think happens this Thursday night as the Bengals host the Ravens?
I think he plays similar to how he played against Indianapolis. He's just going to be dealing with a lot more. The thing we haven't really talked about is that Dalton didn't do well under pressure against Indianapolis. He was actually one of the worst quarterbacks last week, facing pressure against a subpar pass rush unit in Indianapolis, and obviously Baltimore has a lot more guys who can get after the quarterback. Dalton will be sacked more than 2 times like he was against Indianapolis. How he responds to that will be the determining factor of the overall flow of the offense. I think they're going to try to rely on Mixon throughout the game, but like our guest Bill said, the Ravens are going to probably stack the box to take that away from. Laser has to adjust, and just use that numbers advantage against them and try to spread the ball out to the boundary where they don't have their best cornerback in Jimmy Smith. He's still suspended, so definitely buy stock in Green. He's probably going to have a couple splash plays like he always does against the Ravens. I think it's going to be a very up and down performance throughout the game, but on the box score it might look somewhat similar to Indianapolis, but maybe a little bit worse because he's going to have some problems facing pressure like he always does.
Yeah, I did see him, like I said, I was hard on him this last game. Then you look at his stat line, it's pretty dang good. But I did see him bail out of some plays early. I did see him now a couple of times it ended up paying off. One, I think he ran for a first down barely, and another was the broken play he made to Tyler Boyd late in the game for a third down.
And that was his best play of the game. That's something we've never seen before. Stepping
right,
up in the pocket.
Right, and he kept his head up. He and saw what was going on. So, I like you said, I think there's going to be some frustrating moments, but I think there's going to be some wow moments. Ultimately, I think the Bengals maybe squeak this one out just based on recent history. I mean, you go, okay, the 8-3 record since that first game in 2012 against the Ravens, or the terrible primetime record. So, there's something's got to give there. I'd like to think that based on what we saw last week, this is a little bit of a different team than in past couple of years. So, maybe, pretty ugly, 22-18 or 23-20 or, nothing that, and we all know Thursday night games, especially the very first Thursday night game, can be kind of ugly. There's short rest. Again, teams are still trying to figure out who they are and what they want to do on both sides of the ball. So, I think it's a win. Maybe they head to Carolina 2-0, but we'll see. What do you think? I don't know if I got a score or win-loss prediction from you. Did I?
No, I think to your point, the Thursday night games are always in the early season. They're always these completely god awful, totals of less than 30 points, or they're like some lopsided, amazing victory from one of the teams. And I think we're going to see the former in this one because they're obviously familiar with each other. And I don't think that they haven't really blown each other out in recent memory. I think these have always been close games, and it's early in the year, short week. I think we're going to see something in the low 20s, high teens maybe. And I think the line right now is Baltimore -1. I'm kind of leaning towards Baltimore winning a 1-score game just because I'm not exactly 100% sold, but the Bengals could definitely win because they're the more talented team and they just got to prove it.
Yeah. I love that point you just made about the close games. And I think it kind of piggybacks a little bit on what I was saying in terms of the 2014 overtime game. The wacky 2015 game where, the Bengals kind of had a lead and then they had to charge all the way back and all that kind of stuff. If you remember some of the games with Steve Smith, there were some crazy games when Steve Smith was a Raven that were back and forth very close. So this will probably be a nail biter either way, I would think. We'll see, though, as we go forward. Any final thoughts before we do final thoughts, let me just reiterate that this show can be downloaded on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, cincyjungle.com, Stitcher, Google Play app, Did I miss anything? I don't know. But you can also get the stuff on Twitter and get in touch with us, the obinsider@gmail.com, and all that good stuff. So, like I said, we're growing a little bit because we've been officially adopted under the National SB Nation umbrella of podcasts. So we're pretty stoked on that. So you should be able to get this program in a number of different areas, and we're pretty excited about that. John, now final thoughts, my friend.
Just real quick, the day after the Thursday night game, Carson Palmer of Football Life will premiere on NFL Network, the same channel as the game. I was able to, fortunately, I was given access to watch it from someone from NFL.com. Very informative. Definitely check it out. If you have a certain perspective on Carson Palmer, it might get changed because he really opens up, and he's not the kind of guy who allows a lot of people into his life. So definitely check it out if you get the chance. It might open your eyes a little bit.
I wanted to talk about that. I forgot about that. I want to talk to you about that a little bit tonight, but I also didn't want to spoil it for anybody. So we could talk about that next week. I think that's a good topic. And for me, Carson's kind of an odd. I have an odd dichotomy in terms of emotional attachment to Carson because he went to a high school that I ended up coaching at. He went to USC, which I'm a little partial to in terms of college sports. Was a Bengals quarterback and led them to some great seasons. I've actually attended weddings out here where he's been a guest, and people were wondering if I was going to confront him about certain things. They literally asked me that, and of course I did not. But so I've got kind of I think most Bengals fans do a little bit of a love-hate relationship with him, and I hope that this thing, this documentary on him, I plan on watching it. I hope that this shines a little bit more of a light in terms of why he left, why he wanted to leave, the circumstances around that. He has been, both to his credit and discredit, he has been very quiet about that ever since it happened. So I think a lot of fans are going, what the hell happened? And they kind of have some ideas. There's rumors and all that, but he's been like, whatever, I moved on. So I'm very curious to see what that is. And I know you got a sneak preview. Curtis, who was the person that sent it to you from NFL.com? Do you remember?
His name was Andrew. His last name was Andrew Howard. NFL.com.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. So be sure to check that out on Friday. I don't want to get on a soapbox or anything like that. My final thought is just that as we record this show, we are one day removed from the 17th anniversary of 9/11. John, apparently you were very young. I didn't know quite how young you were, but you divulged that earlier in the show. You were very young. I was younger, but not as young as you. It's a time of a lot of divisiveness, and I know what's very cool about this show is we have a lot of people from outside of the country that listen to this program and download this program, which I am so stoked about. Obviously, it being an American sport and all of that kind of stuff, I'm venturing to guess, without doing a demographics quiz, that most of our listeners are in America and are Americans. Again, I don't want to make this political or anything like that. It's just a very divisive time. People are very quick to snarl at each other about their views and all that kind of stuff. Just kind of keep in mind that, almost 2 decades ago, one of the worst things that has ever happened to this country happened. And this country, even at that point, was a little bit divided. They weren't pretty stoked on that president either, but they rallied around each other, and some good things occurred. Some healing occurred. Some other subsequent things that people may not agree with occurred. But, just very important date in U.S. history, and keep that in mind. And there's some stuff about servicemen and women in terms of cops and firefighters and all that kind of stuff. If you go back and see what those folks did in New York that day, and elsewhere, they stepped up big time, and a lot of them sacrificed their lives and had families and all that kind of stuff. So I guess I just kind of want to say, reflect on the date. It's an important one in American history, and hopefully things in this country get a little less fractured in terms of viewpoints and how people are treating each other and all of that. So I don't know. I just kind of wanted to keep that in mind. I was thinking about that yesterday, and I didn't want to be on my soapbox too much, John. I hope I was not. But I don't know. I vividly remember that day, I guess, because I was about 19 years old. And, I just vividly remember kind of pulling into college that day and all that kind of stuff. And very, very surreal. Gosh, you must have been what, like 5, 6?
I was 5. Yeah, I was with my grandpa that day. He was a veteran of World War II, so it was one of my first memories, actually.
Yeah,
Just
I'm sure.
watching him unfold.
Yeah, was he? Yeah, I'm sure he's pretty emotional. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to end the program on a sad note. I just
Football.
Yeah, I know. Seriously, I just wanted to say, hey, let's reflect history. And let's be good to each other. You know what I mean? So with that being said, the Bengals take on the Ravens in a very important game on Thursday Night Football in Week 2. John and I think it's going to be a close one. We'll see who wins, and we'll talk about it next week on the Cincy Jungle podcast, the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. For my co-host, John Sheeran, I'm Anthony Cosenza. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for your calls, your texts, and all of your contact with us. We'll see you next episode. Appreciate it.